My parents forged my signature and sold my inheritance. Then the buyer discovered who I really was. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and for most of my life, I believed the biggest lie a child can believe. I believed my parents loved me. Not perfectly. Not gently. Not in the way other people's parents seem to love them. But I believed that underneath the criticism, the cold shoulders, the unfair comparisons, and the quiet way they always chose my older sister over me, there had to be love somewhere. Buried deep. Hidden under pride. Covered by disappointment. I told myself that for years. I told myself that when my mother forgot my birthday but planned a surprise dinner for my sister 2 weeks later. I told myself that when my father called my engineering scholarship luck, but called my sister's third attempt at opening a boutique brave. I told myself that when my grandmother died, and I stood alone by her casket while my parents comforted everyone except me. But the day I found out they had forged my signature and sold the only thing my grandmother left me, I finally understood the truth. Some parents do not love their children equally. Some parents love what they can use, and when they can no longer use you, they sell whatever piece of you they can reach. My grandmother, Eleanor Caldwell, was the only person in my family who ever made me feel seen. She lived on a quiet 20-acre property outside Asheville, North Carolina. It was not a mansion. It was not some flashy estate with marble floors and gates. It was better than that. It was land. Old trees. A white farmhouse with blue shutters. A red barn my grandfather built before he died. A creek that ran along the back edge of the property. And a small hill where my grandmother used to sit with me at sunset and say, "Ethan, land remembers. People forget. But land remembers." When I was a kid, I did not understand what she meant. I just knew that her house felt like safety. Every summer, when my parents wanted me out of the way, they sent me to Grandma Eleanor's. My sister, Marissa, hated going there. She said it was boring. No malls, no friends, no attention. But I loved it. Grandma taught me how to fix fences, how to split firewood, how to make biscuits without measuring anything, and how to sit in silence without feeling lonely. More importantly, she taught me that I was not the failure my parents made me feel like. When my father laughed at my dream of becoming an architect, Grandma Eleanor bought me my first drafting set. When my mother told me I was too quiet to succeed, Grandma said, "Quiet people build the world loud people brag about." When Marissa wrecked my first car and my parents somehow blamed me for leaving the keys in the kitchen, Grandma drove 2 hours, handed me $500, and said, "You are not responsible for other people's dishonesty." She saw everything. She saw the way my parents treated me. And near the end of her life, she did something my parents never forgave her for. She changed her will. I did not know the details at first. I only knew that after her funeral, my parents were furious. My father's jaw was clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. My mother kept crying, but not the kind of crying people do when they are grieving. It was angry crying. Marissa sat on the sofa scrolling through her phone, whispering, "This is unbelievable," over and over. Then my father looked at me with eyes full of blame and said, "I hope you're proud of yourself." I was 24. I had just buried the woman who practically raised me, and I had no idea what he meant. A week later, Grandma's attorney, Mr. Whitaker, called me into his office. He was an older man with silver hair, a soft voice, and the kind of careful eyes that made you feel like every word mattered. He told me my grandmother had left the farmhouse and all 20 acres to me, not to my parents. Not to Marissa. To me. There was also a modest bank account for taxes and maintenance, along with a handwritten letter sealed in an envelope. I still remember the first line. "My dear Ethan, this house was the only place where you were allowed to breathe. Keep breathing." I cried in that attorney's office. Not loud. Not dramatically. Just the kind of crying that happens when someone finally gives you proof that you mattered. My parents did not cry. They raged. My father called me selfish. My mother said I had manipulated a dying woman. Marissa said Grandma must have been confused. They demanded I do the right thing and sign the property over to the family so it could be sold and split evenly. But Grandma's letter had warned me. Do not let them guilt you into giving away the one thing I protected for you. So I refused. For the first time in my life, I refused them. And after that, my family changed. Or maybe they simply stopped pretending. For 2 years, they barely spoke to me unless they needed something. My mother sent long texts about how expensive Marissa's life had become. My father called to remind me that property taxes were a burden, and that selling would be practical. Marissa sent me listings of condos and investment opportunities, as if I should trade Grandma's land for her latest dream. I ignored most of it. I was building my career by then. I had finished my degree in architecture, worked under a firm in Charlotte, and eventually moved into commercial restoration. Old buildings, historic properties, forgotten places that deserved a second life. Grandma's farmhouse became my anchor. I did not live there full-time at first, but I went every weekend. I repaired the porch, repainted the shutters, cleaned the barn, restored the stone fireplace. I planted apple trees along the south fence because Grandma had always wanted them. It was not just property to me. It was the only inheritance I had ever wanted. Then, one Thursday morning, everything changed. I was in a meeting when my phone rang 3 times in a row, unknown number. I ignored it. Then came a text. Mr. Caldwell, my name is Daniel Mercer. I recently purchased the property at 1849 Briar Hollow Road. I believe there may be a serious issue. Please call me. I stared at the message for a full minute. 1849 Briar Hollow Road was Grandma's address. My address. I stepped out of the conference room and called immediately. A man answered with a calm but tense voice. Mr. Caldwell? Yes. Who are you? My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm a real estate developer. I purchased the Briar Hollow property last month. My hand tightened around the phone. No, you didn't. There was a pause. I was afraid you'd say that. What do you mean you purchased it? I bought it from Richard and Linda Caldwell. My parents. The hallway seemed to tilt. That property is mine, I said. I know that now, Daniel replied. That's why I'm calling you. At first, I thought it had to be a scam. A mistake, maybe some parcel mix-up. Maybe another road with the same name. But Daniel sent me the documents. The sales contract. The deed transfer. The notarized authorization. And there it was. My name. Ethan James Caldwell. Signed at the bottom, only it was not my signature. Not even close. I have a very specific signature. Sharp E. Long line through the T, full last name. The one on the document looked like someone had practiced for 20 minutes and gotten bored. Below it was a notary stamp. A witness signature, and my parents' names as authorized family representatives. They had sold my grandmother's property for $680,000. Without telling me, without my permission. Without even having the decency to forge my name well. I drove to my parents' house that night. I do not remember the drive clearly. I remember gripping the steering wheel. I remember the sound of my breathing. I remember thinking, please let there be an explanation. Even then, some pathetic part of me wanted to believe they had not done it. My mother opened the door. She smiled like nothing was wrong. Ethan. What a surprise. I walked past her into the living room. My father was in his recliner watching TV. Marissa was at the kitchen island drinking wine. I threw the documents onto the coffee table. Explain this. My father muted the television. My mother went pale. Marissa looked at the papers, then looked away. That was all the answer I needed. You forged my signature, I said. My father stood slowly. Lower your voice. You sold my property. My mother pressed a hand to her chest. We did what was necessary. Necessary. That word hit me harder than any denial could have. I laughed once. It came out cold. Necessary for who? For this family, my father snapped. That land was sitting there doing nothing. It was mine. It should have been all of ours, Marissa said. I turned to her. So you helped? She lifted her chin. Grandma was unfair. Grandma knew exactly what she was doing. My mother's face twisted. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was? People asking why Eleanor left everything to you? Like we were bad parents? I looked at her for a long moment. You were. The room went silent. My father stepped forward. You watch your mouth. No. I watched my mouth for 30 years. I swallowed every insult, every excuse, every time you chose Marissa, every time you treated me like a guest in my own family. But this? This is fraud. My mother started crying. Not because she was sorry. Because I had said the word out loud. Fraud. My father's voice dropped. You are not going to destroy this family over a piece of land. That piece of land is the only place in this world where I was loved. My mother flinched. For half a second, I thought maybe the words had reached her. Then she said, don't be dramatic. Something inside me finally closed. I gathered the documents and said, get a lawyer. My father laughed. You won't sue your own parents. I looked him dead in the eye. You should have thought about that before you stole from your own son. The next morning, I called Mr. Whitaker. He was quiet as I explained. Too quiet. When I finished, he said, Ethan, do not contact them again. Do not threaten them. Do not negotiate. Send me everything. Then he paused. And Ethan? Yes? This is not just a family dispute. This is potentially criminal. I knew that. But hearing it made my stomach turn. For the next 2 weeks, my life became a storm of documents, calls, and discoveries. The notary who had stamped the deed was a woman named Carla Vance. She was a friend of my mother's from church. The witness was Marissa's boyfriend. The authorization form claimed I had signed in person, even though on that date, I had been in Denver presenting at a restoration conference. I had flight records, hotel receipts, and even photos from the event. My parents had not just lied. They had been lazy. Arrogant. Certain I would never fight back. But the strangest part was Daniel Mercer. The buyer. At first, I expected him to be an enemy. A developer who would hide behind paperwork and try to bulldoze the farmhouse before the courts could stop him. Instead, he asked to meet me. We met at a coffee shop halfway between Asheville and Charlotte. Daniel was in his early 50s, wearing a tailored navy suit, no tie. He had the polished look of a man who had spent decades in boardrooms, but his eyes were sharp in a way that felt more honest than charming. He brought a folder thicker than mine. "I owe you an apology," he said as soon as we sat down. "You didn't forge my name." "No. But I bought something I should have examined more carefully." I studied him. "Why are you helping me?" He looked out the window for a moment. "Because my father lost his farm the same way." That surprised me. Daniel opened the folder and slid a page toward me. "I bought the property under Mercer Urban Renewal. We plan to restore the farmhouse and convert the barn into an event venue. Not demolish it." I blinked. "You weren't going to tear it down?" "No. That land has history. That's why I wanted it." For the first time since his call, I felt the smallest amount of air return to my lungs. Then Daniel said, "But there's something else you need to know." He pulled out a copy of the purchase agreement. "Your parents did not just sell the land. They pushed for a fast closing. Cash discount. No inspection delays. No public listing. They wanted it done quietly." "Of course they did. They also told me you were mentally unstable." I froze. Daniel's jaw tightened. "They said you had inherited the property but were incapable of managing it. They claimed you had given them authority to sell because you were drowning in debt and embarrassed." For a moment, I could not speak. My parents had not only stolen from me. They had built a story where I was too broken to question it. Daniel continued. "I almost walked away. Something felt wrong. But then your father showed me the notarized documents." I stared down at the fake signature. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Caldwell, after we closed, I started looking into the property history for restoration grants. That's when I found your work." "My work?" "Caldwell Preservation Group. I had started my own small firm a year earlier. We specialized in saving historic structures that larger developers ignored." Daniel gave a faint smile. "You restored the Whitcomb Textile Building. The Harrington Depot. The old courthouse annex in Wilkes County." "Yes." That's when I realized something didn't add up. The man your parents described as irresponsible and desperate was one of the most respected young preservation architects in the region. I said nothing. He tapped the folder. "And then I found the article about your grandmother." My chest tightened. Years earlier, a local magazine had written a piece about Grandma Eleanor and her work preserving Appalachian oral histories. I had given a short quote in it. Daniel said, "You called the Briar Hollow farmhouse your first understanding of home." I looked away. He lowered his voice. "That's when I knew I needed to call you." For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than rage. Not peace. Not relief. But confirmation. Someone outside the family had looked at the facts and seen me clearly. Daniel agreed to cooperate fully. He paused all development plans, gave my attorney every communication, every email, every text, every call log. And my parents? They panicked. First came the texts. My mother. "Ethan, please don't do this. Your father's blood pressure is dangerously high." Then my father. "You are making a mistake that will follow you forever." Then Marissa. "You already had more than enough. Why are you trying to ruin us?" I did not respond. Then came the relatives. Aunt Carol said, "They are still your parents." Uncle Jim said, "Family handles things privately." A cousin I had not seen in 8 years messaged me. "Is land really worth sending your mom to jail?" I wanted to ask them where they had been when my parents stole from me. But I had learned something. People who demand peace after the damage is done are usually the ones who benefited from the silence before it. So I stayed silent. My attorney did not. Mr. Whitaker filed a civil action to void the sale, restore the deed, and seek damages. He also referred the forged documents to the county district attorney. That was when my parents finally asked to meet. Against my attorney's advice, I agreed to one meeting. Not at their house. Not alone. We met in Mr. Whitaker's conference room. My father looked older than I remembered. My mother looked smaller. Marissa looked furious. Their lawyer sat beside them, a nervous man who kept adjusting his glasses. My father spoke first. "Ethan, this has gone too far." I almost smiled. That was my father's way. "Never. I'm sorry. Never. I was wrong. Just. This has gone too far." As if consequences were the problem. Not the crime. Mr. Whitaker folded his hands. "Mr. Caldwell, your clients can begin by explaining how Ethan's signature appeared on a deed transfer while he was in Colorado." Their lawyer cleared his throat. "We are not here to admit wrongdoing." "Then why are we here?" I asked. My mother looked at me with wet eyes. "We needed the money." There it was. The truth. Finally. Marissa looked down. My father's face hardened. I asked, "For what?" No one answered. Mr. Whitaker slid a bank record across the table. We already know. I looked at it. Large transfers. Credit card payments. Business loans. A luxury SUV. A deposit on a retail space. Marissa's boutique. Again, my sister's dream had failed twice before. Each time, my parents bailed her out. This time, they had used my inheritance to do it. I looked at Marissa. You let them steal Grandma's house to fund another boutique? Her eyes flashed. It wasn't just a boutique. It was my future. It was my inheritance. You always act like you're better than us. No, Marissa. I just stopped letting you treat me like I'm less. My mother sobbed. We were going to pay you back. How? Silence. With what money? No answer. My father leaned forward. You never needed that land. You have your career. Marissa needed help. I stared at him. That sentence explained my entire childhood. Marissa needed. Ethan managed. Marissa hurt. Ethan understood. Marissa failed. Ethan sacrificed. I said quietly, you built this family on the idea that I could survive anything, so it did not matter what you took from me. My mother covered her mouth. My father looked away. I stood. I'm not settling. Their lawyer sat up. Mr. Caldwell, a trial would be extremely damaging to everyone involved. I nodded. Yes, I imagine fraud usually is. And I walked out. The legal process was slow, but truth has a weight that lies cannot carry forever. The notary broke first. Carla Vance admitted my mother had brought the documents to her already signed. She had notarized them as a favor, claiming she trusted Linda. Marissa's boyfriend admitted he had signed as witness even though I was not present. Emails showed my father pressuring Daniel for a fast close. Text showed my mother telling Marissa, once it is sold, Ethan will not be able to undo it. One message from Marissa said, he is too scared of Dad to fight. I stared at that message for a long time. Not because it hurt. Because once, it would have been true. But not anymore. 3 months later, the court voided the sale. The deed returned to my name. Daniel's company was reimbursed through the frozen sale funds that had not yet been spent, and he reserved the right to pursue separate damages. My parents were ordered to pay legal fees. But the criminal case was worse. Forgery. Fraudulent conveyance. False notarization. Conspiracy. My mother took a plea deal. My father fought until the evidence buried him. Marissa avoided charges only by cooperating, but her boutique collapsed before it opened. Investors ran. The landlord sued. Her boyfriend left. For years, my parents had told everyone I was the unstable one. Now their names were in the local paper. Not mine. The headline was small, but it was enough. Couple charged in forged property sale scheme. The first time I read it, I did not feel joy. That surprised me. I thought I would. I thought revenge would feel like fire. Instead, it felt like standing in the ruins of a house I had spent my whole life pretending was still livable. Justice does not always feel good. Sometimes it just feels clean. A month after the deed was restored, I went back to Briar Hollow. The grass was overgrown. The porch needed sweeping. A storm had knocked branches across the driveway. But the house was still there. Grandma's house. My house. I walked up the hill behind the barn where she and I used to watch the sunset. For the first time in months, I cried. Not for my parents. Not for Marissa. For the little boy who had believed he had to earn love by being useful. For the young man who thought silence was loyalty. For the grandson who almost lost the last gift from the only person who truly understood him. A few days later, Daniel Mercer called again. I have a proposal, he said. I almost laughed. The last time someone had a proposal for that land, it ended in criminal charges. He chuckled. Fair. But this one involves you keeping ownership. We met at the farmhouse. Daniel walked the property with me, pointing out possibilities. The barn could be restored. The farmhouse could become a heritage retreat. The creek trail could be preserved. The old smokehouse could be rebuilt as a small exhibit space for local history. Then he said something I did not expect. Your grandmother preserved stories. You preserve buildings. Maybe this place should do both. That idea stayed with me. 6 months later, Briar Hollow became the first project of my own nonprofit branch, the Eleanor House Foundation. We restored the farmhouse and opened it for writing retreats, historical workshops, and family archive preservation. The barn became an event space for local artists and community gatherings. Daniel invested. I designed the restoration. And Grandma's name went on the sign. Not Caldwell. Eleanor. Because she was the reason the land survived. On opening day, I stood on the porch in a dark blue suit, looking out at nearly 200 people gathered under string lights. Local reporters came, former clients came, neighbors came, even Mr. Whitaker came, looking proud enough to make me emotional all over again. Then, near the back of the crowd, I saw them. My parents. My mother wore sunglasses even though the sun was setting. My father looked thinner. Marissa stood beside them, arms crossed, face tight with humiliation. For a second, the old instinct returned. Go to them, Smooth it over. Make it less awkward. Protect their feelings. Then I remembered the fake signature. I stayed where I was. After the ceremony, my mother approached me. Ethan. I turned. She looked at the restored house, the lights, the people laughing near the barn. You did all this? I nodded. With Grandma's land. Her lips trembled. I never thought it would become something like this. That was the closest she had ever come to admitting she was wrong. My father said nothing. Marissa stared at the sign, the Eleanor House Foundation. Then she said bitterly, so you got everything. I looked at her. No. Marissa. I kept what was mine. My mother whispered. Can we talk sometime? I studied her face. There was sadness there. Maybe regret. Maybe only loss. But I had learned not to confuse regret with accountability. Maybe one day, I said. But not today. My father's jaw tightened. The old version of me would have feared that look. The new version simply turned and walked back to the people who had shown up without needing to own me. Later that night, after everyone left, I sat on the porch steps. The house glowed behind me. The barn lights shimmered across the grass. The creek moved quietly in the dark. Daniel sat beside me and handed me a cup of coffee. Your grandmother would be proud, he said. I looked out at the land. For years, my parents thought inheritance meant money. Something to sell. Something to divide. Something to take. But they were wrong. Inheritance is not always what someone leaves you. Sometimes it is what they teach you to protect. Grandma left me land, yes, but more than that, she left me proof. Proof that I had been loved. Proof that I had value before I had achievements. Proof that family is not defined by who shares your blood, but by who refuses to erase you. My parents forged my signature because they believed my name did not matter. They sold my inheritance because they believed I would stay quiet. They told the buyer I was weak, unstable, desperate, and easy to control. But the buyer discovered who I really was. And so did I. I was not the forgotten son anymore. I was not the family disappointment. I was not the quiet boy waiting to be chosen. I was Eleanor Caldwell's grandson. I was the owner of Briar Hollow. And for the first time in my life, I was finally home.